What's up, and welcome to another edition of the Cover 2 Recap. I'm Edward Lewis, publisher of BruinSportsport.com. This is Joey Coffin, the UCLA beat writer for the OC Register. We're here tonight in San Bernardino, where UCLA just wrapped up day number 9, and I guess practice number 2 of day number 9. And a lot of news and notes, very eventful day. Josh Rosen got yelled at by Jim Mora. A couple injuries to note. A couple guys came back. Let's dive right into it. Just starting with the news and notes. First and foremost, UCLA got healthy. Jake Brendel, Alex Redmond, and Connor McDermott were all back at practice today. Jake Brendel and Connor McDermott were working more with Sal Losi and were kind of out of 11-on-11 drills, but at least they're back out here. They look like they're fine. Alex Redmond started at center in place of Jake Brendel. He's fine. He looks like he's going to be good to go. Bo Lillarun sat out the morning practice, but started again later in the evening and with an ankle injury, so he's going to be fine. The one notable injury, though, to note is Takaris McKinley. Left practice early this morning with what appeared to be some sort of head issue and was not out on the field tonight. Joey, any take on those injuries and kind of getting guys back and losing tact?
Probably the key. We don't know what tax is, so I don't really know how bad it is. He was in the medical tent, and he had some IVs in him, and so I don't. Maybe I really don't want to say. But I think the big news is that Connor McDermott's back. The MRI revealed nothing damaging. He's going to be able to be a go. There's no long-term issue with him, and Jake Brendel's just day-to-day. Having those two guys healthy, probably their two most important linemen.
Yeah, Noel Mazzoni in the post-game press conference actually joked that, it was a sigh of relief when they got back Connor McDermott's MRI, and he made a funny joke if you want to go watch that video. Other post-game press conferences that we need to get into, starting with Deion Hollins, he broke down kind of Tom Bradley and the difference between Bradley and Jeff Ulbricht's defense and said, it's a lot more exotic. It's going to be they're going to try to create a lot more confusion. What do you take from Deion's kind of rundown of Tom Bradley's defense?
It sounded like an encouraging thing for this defense if they're going to try and bring pressure from different angles and rather than the same stuff over and over, because they do need to do a better job of creating pressure and getting after quarterbacks. They had 29 sacks last year. That was good for 8th in the Pac-12. And for the sake of comparison, Washington had 52, Utah had 55. So if they're going to be one of the elite kind of pass rushing teams in the conference, they're really going to need to attack the quarterback in more creative ways, or just generate rush from your first 4 guys, and that's tough to do. I think you have to be a little more creative.
Yeah, and one thing that I took away from the Deion Hollins interview was, everybody when they change as coordinators or head coaches or whatever, they always want to compare, this guy is so much better than the old guy. But, you really look at it out here on the field, and when you're out in the practice field, you see kind of different looks, different exotic looks. And that was kind of the main criticism with Jeff Ulbrich, was it was basically always a 4-2-5, and that was the way it was going to be. If it was a blitz, it was very generic, very vanilla, and this is the way it's going to be. With Tom Bradley, man, he puts down, a 5-2, a 4-3, a 3-4, and you never know who's going to come. And you could tell why, Josh Rosen's been struggling in these past few days, because when you're blitzing that kind of pressure with that kind of front, and then you take out Connor McDermott, Jake Brendel, and Alex Redmond, you could kind of tell why this team is struggling to pick up Tom Bradley's defense.
One thing I do wonder if they'll simplify it at any point, because Bradley talked about at first you want to kind of throw a lot at him, and then you simplify it and get him bored. So I wonder if it'll change it all over the next week. I think what they're doing right now is confusing him, and it seems to be a good thing, but there's something to just watch out for, I think.
The other notable press conference was Sosa Jamabo speaking with the media for really the first time since his incident in Texas and the first time this camp. He was very impressive speaking, but he also told us he's going to stay at running back. That's a guy we've been waiting to see a lot from these last 2 weeks in San Bernardino. We wanted to see, his 5-star impact status be a running back, and he really hasn't showed that. And we actually kind of wonder maybe he was a receiver, but he told us he's going to stay at running back. What did you take from Sosa's interview?
Yeah, I think the main news is he wants to be a running back, and he's going to be a running back. He talked about some of the things he's working on with Kennedy Polamalu. Pass blocking's a big one. He said is getting his pad level lower, and I think that's been a big thing with him this week, because he kind of runs high, looks as if he's prancing almost. I think Kennedy needs to kind of work with him in it. And they talked about it kind of getting a little lower, especially the line of scrimmage when you get in that first impact and everybody's 6'2" and 300 pounds. You want to kind of – receivers, they always talk about receivers play high, running backs play low, and I think he needs to do a little – kind of work on that a little bit. But when he gets in the open field, you can kind of see why he was a 5-star. He runs really fluidly when he gets in space. The thing is, kind of needs to get there.
I feel like we're burying the lead a little bit here, but let's get into it. Josh Rosen was yelled at by Jim Mora this morning. The context of it all was Josh was having a really solid day. I had him at 8 for 8 and 11-on-11 drills. Threw a couple touchdown passes, looked really crisp, looked really sharp. And then we get to Hail Mary practices, and he kind of just takes it nonchalant. It's basically a walk-through Hail Mary practice. All the receivers run to the end zone. The DBs aren't really trying. And Josh heaves a ball that he kind of half-assedly throws. It lands basically at the 7 or 8 yard yard line, doesn't even get to the end zone, and he's throwing it from the 35-yard line. This is a guy with a laser rocket arm, 5-star quarterback. And Jim Mora just let him have it. There was a lot of, this isn't Bosco, you're not the anointed one. At one point, he even turns to the media and says, tell your readers this is why we don't have a starter. So really let him have it, and really kind of was upset that he wasn't really trying hard in a drill that he felt was important. What did you take from that whole incident?
It seemed like you really put him on blast. I mean, it was really quiet. It went on for a few minutes, and Rosen never responded and kind of just took his lumps. I think essentially is they want Rosen to step up and be the guy, and I think kind of lighten the fire. Maybe they wanted to see how he'd react to it, and he was dogging it a little bit. But it's also they practiced for 2.5 hours. It's not the first time in the world somebody's done that, but it was interesting to kind of see them light a fire under him.
Yeah, what I took out of it was Josh has been really good in 11-11 and 7-on-7. I don't think anybody's questioning that he's the best quarterback out here physically throughout the last couple weeks. But what I took out of it was he's obviously not doing things off the field that Jim Mora would like, because the way he turned to us and said, tell your readers this is why he's not the starter, because from an outside perspective, you come out here and you see, holy smokes, this guy is infinitely better than Jerry Neuheisel and Mike Faithful. Why is he not the starter? And for Jim to say that, it's basically saying because he's doing things like this in a drill that I want to be done. He's half-assedly throwing a ball into the end zone and things like that. Later in the evening tonight in the second practice, they were doing pooch punts, and he was barely pooch punting the ball, the way Jim Mora would have liked him to see. So you can kind of tell this is Jim telling him, look, I need you to shape up off the field as well as on it.
I also kind of wondered, do you do that full-on tirade if he's the guy, if he's not your guy? I mean, essentially, would you do that if he was going to be your backup? You wouldn't do that to your backup quarterback. It's something you do to your starter, a guy who's going to play a big role on your team.
Absolutely. I thought Josh responded well. He took it. Josh is kind of a fiery kid, and he's been known to talk back before, but he took it all in stride and really kind of responded in the evening practice.
Yeah, I thought that was good as well. You didn't see him sigh or kind of go or talk back. He just took his lumps, essentially.
All right, let's get into top performers here. We each had one. The DBs had a really big day. I think both of our top performers come from the DBs. I had him at 9 interceptions this morning, and one of the biggest reasons was Fabian Moreau. He had a pick, and in one-on-ones, he was basically you couldn't get over him, I guess. Even in the later portion of practice in the evening, when it was basically a glorified walkthrough, Neuheisel and Rosen were trying to feed balls into his side of the field, and he just wasn't having it. So, last year he was the superstar of camp, didn't give up a pass really the whole camp, and I think this camp is coming along the same way for Fabian Moreau. Who was your top performer?
I had Jalil Wadood mostly he had a really huge hit on Devin Fuller during the morning practice. Fuller ran a little kind of slant play over the middle of the field, maybe 10 yards, and Wadood laid into him. Fuller actually held on to the ball and turned to Wadood and held the ball up. But it was still a pretty impressive hit. And Jalil Wadood is not a big guy. He's, all but $150 essentially. But he really kind of lays into guys pretty well. He kind of gets up to the line of scrimmage and he'll make plays. He's a guy, I think, who's kind of, as a sophomore, kind of stepping in a little more.
Also had an interception this morning. Yeah. That'll wrap up our coverage from day number 9 out here in San Bernardino. As always, you can follow my coverage of UCLA on Twitter at Edward_Lewis. You can follow Joey's coverage on Twitter at Joey R. Kaufman. Until the next time, thanks for tuning in to the Cover 2 Recap.